bad.
What's up? Another episode of Reflect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Renz, also known as Ricky Renz, and a great episode for you today. Today we have a guest on, somebody that I've been a fan of for a really long time. I've listened to him throughout the years on so many of the shows I love, like Tinfoil Hat Podcast. He's been on the Higher Side Chats with Greg Carlwood a bunch of times. Marty Leeds, you can go to martyleeds33.com to find all his lectures, documentaries, and videos and podcasts. And he's just a wealth of knowledge when you talk about gematria, which is when you believe there's numbers assigned to letters and there's some type of alphabetical code, and numerology and symbolism. And he goes down so many different rabbit holes, and he's not afraid to talk about anything and everything. He's knowledgeable about so many different things like symbolism and language and religion and all these different things. And he's done some amazing documentaries also. His Flat Earth documentary, which I know is a controversial topic, and it's a perfect example of how he's not afraid to explore any topic whatsoever, regardless how skeptical you are of that side of the argument. You can watch it, and I send it to people who think the idea of even questioning this science of the Earth being round or flat is just silly, and yet they're like, that's actually a really good documentary that asks some really good questions and makes some really good points. So I mean, that's just an example of how thorough his work is and how well researched and thought out his arguments are. So I mean, just a really, really fun guy to talk to. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Also, I haven't said it in a couple shows. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the show everywhere: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. It's available on every podcast app. It's also available on all the video platforms, all the, well, what I would call kind of the major ones: YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, Library. It's also available on Float, so you can go on any of those video platforms. If you've completely boycotted YouTube, and rightfully so, you can find it on those other platforms. And Odyssey is pretty cool because I believe you can connect it to your Chromecast, so similar to YouTube being able to watch it on your TV, you can do the same thing with Odyssey. And they do have a library.tv app that you can get on your phone, which is really cool. It gives you notifications when all the shows you subscribe to have a new episode, which is something that YouTube is notoriously bad at with alternative media. People just aren't being notified that there's new videos. And I know these alternatives aren't as convenient to use as YouTube, because YouTube is on your phone and there's an app on every smart TV and Fire Stick and all that stuff, and it's compatible with Chromecast. But you can just go to Firefox, go to a web browser, go to odyssey.com, go to bitchute.com, and just search what you want to search, and you can watch it that way. It's not as convenient. It's a little bit more work, but it's a way that you can watch some really interesting documentaries and channels and researchers, and find all the interesting stuff we used to be able to watch on YouTube, because many of the people we love aren't even there anymore. So please do that and start supporting these other platforms. Like I said, odyssey.com. If you go to their website on your phone, you can actually connect it to your TV. I believe you can even play Library or Odyssey or BitChute, one of the three. You can play it in the background. You can play a video as audio, which is something you can't do on YouTube without a premium account. But so that's one way you can help the show. Subscribe, rate, all that stuff. And everybody who has, from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate you taking the time to do it. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. You go there, you write a little review, and it helps. It helps with people finding the show. It helps with people who do find the show, see that, oh, wow, there's a lot of, 4 stars, 5 stars, and there's a lot of good little written out reviews and explanations on why I should check out this show. So that's really appreciated. Also, I have a Patreon page. If you want to support the show on Patreon, please do. I let you know in advance when booking. And I do once a month a Patreon podcast where I do a show with my Patreon supporters and I release it as an episode. So if you want to be on the next one, please join our Patreon page and you'll get the Zoom link with everybody else and you'll know when that show is going to be recorded and you can be a part of it. I also have a Rockfin show. It's my attempt to do a solo show. I kind of just rant for 20 minutes or a half an hour. It's on average, it's been like a half an hour and just talk about what's on my mind, what I've been thinking about, those type of things. So go there, support me on Rockfin by subscribing to my channel. You can also tip me there. I have a PayPal account. You can find the links in the show description. You can tip me on PayPal also if you would like. There's already been some people who have, and I truly appreciate you guys for doing that. I have a merch store, the Ripple Effect Podcast, merch.com. And now I start putting all these links in the show description for the audio also. So if you subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast Addict, whatever app you use, you'll find the links in the show description. So you can get to the merch store super easy, Patreon page super easy, the Rockfin page super easy, all that type of stuff. Also, I'm on fringe.fm. Every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast on fringe.fm. It's a 24/7 alternative media radio station. 24/7, there's something interesting to listen to, a show maybe you've heard of or a show you haven't heard of, talking about fringe topics and going down some rabbit holes. So I think that covers just about everything. Enjoy this conversation with Marty Leeds. Please check out his work, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
I play electric, yeah. I have a Schecter. I have an early model. I have a 2004 CSH1. So it's the semi hollow. Oh yeah. See that mine is like that. It's neck through like that with the strings, and it's semi hollow. Yeah.
I love it. It's
dude, I bought that guitar for like $400, and it is unbelievable, man.
Well, you know what's crazy is that so many people I know who play guitar, they buy some like super expensive guitar that they think they really want, and then they never play it. There's the, maybe the less expensive one that they're just more comfortable playing or just more enjoyable to play. It's almost like a car, you're right. Like you can't quantify sometimes the experience you have with it. Like you can look at statistics, right? You can look at like, okay, it goes this fast, this much horsepower, all this stuff. But then if you get in the car, like there's a certain feel to it. Same thing with a guitar. There's a certain feel that you might just enjoy that somebody else might hate, but something else that somebody else dislikes, you might actually love, or you might actually accept. So it's it's weird. One of my favorite guitars, it's that old Washburn. It's in a case now, but a Washburn Dimeback Daryl. And it was like,
really?
Yeah, it was
okay.
It was like my first like real nice guitar. And I loved it. It was just so easy to play and it was fun. And for metal music, it was perfect because that's what I was mostly playing. And so it was just, but it wasn't a super expensive guitar or anything, but it was just, I don't know, just something about it that I always just loved. I loved playing it. It was just comfortable. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to quantify. I've had friends that are like, oh, try this guitar. And I'm like, I don't know. There's something about it. It just doesn't feel, or doesn't have the sound you quite want. But it's but sometimes we can drive ourselves crazy with that type of details too. I remember back in the day, I'm like, oh, like my guitar, the reason I don't sound good is because my guitar sucks. And then I remember bringing it to a local music store, and the guy was I think I had to get it fixed or something like that. He's like, oh, it sounds good now, and he's jamming on it. And I'm like, how the fuck do you make it sound like that? I felt like clearly to me, it's
oh, I stuck. That's what the problem is.
But good guitarists will make any guitar sound halfway decent.
Yeah. I have a similar. I have an Ibanez Ergodyne. I don't know if you know that, but I mean that I bought for I think like $350 or something, and it's killer, man. It plays so great. It records great. I haven't even changed the strings on it in like 2 years, and I can still record on it. It's like I mean it's great. So.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing we have in common. We both are big music fans and music. Well, you're much more of an accomplished musician than I am.
No.
I grew up Well, you have
I jerk off in my bedroom a lot. Let's just say that. Yeah.
well, how many albums do you have? What, a couple, right? You got.
Yeah, I'm working on another one right now with a guy. I'm in the middle of moving, but yeah. And then I just finished one. I don't know, a couple months ago. And then when I moved to the island, I finished one that I was working on. But that, I mean, they were both of those are just like EPs. Like one was 6 songs, and the other's like 8 or something. So.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's awesome that you can basically do everything on your own at home now. You get Pro Tools, you get a laptop, or even a desktop, and you can put together a whole layers of sounds and effects, and really make something sound super full, and do it all on your own. But the whole process, I mean, people don't realize how much work goes into like doing the whole thing yourself. Like when I was playing in a band with my brother, it's like if we had an idea for a song, everybody has their own instrument. You could be like, okay, let's give it a try. Let's put it together. Let's see what the drums sound like, the bass sound. We could do it all together, jam, and give it a try, see what it sounds like. Oh, it doesn't sound good. Well, try something else. And but when you're doing it on your own, like you'll have this idea in your head, like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then once you start putting it together, you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or it doesn't sound quite like and then you have to go through the whole process again of putting, because the one instrument I never played was drums. I suck at drums. I use all the drum machines and just do it that way and try to make it sound as organic and as acoustic as possible. It's never quite the same, obviously, because there's something about live drums that really kind of, I don't know. I mean, you just can't recreate it that well. But it's when you're recording it, it's definitely more acceptable than live. Using I forget what band I was into that I remember watching a live performance. Like, wait, they use drum machines live? I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what's the
yeah,
point of going to see them live? Because a big part of it is just seeing the drummer and that stuff. I mean, you could stare at a drummer all day, just watching them jam out. So, but what type of music you into growing up? Are we still? How old are you, Marty? If you don't mind me asking.
oh, are we live right now?
Yeah, I'm recording. I always record. I that just
Do you record? I mean, are you live or are you just?
no. I'm just recording, but no, we're not.
Oh, okay, cool. I just didn't know. I all sorts, man. I grew up in Wisconsin, and so I grew up like around like in my high school. There was lots of really good musicians. There was like a really good music program, and so I ended up hooking up with guys there and learned to like harmonize and sing. And so we did everything from like show tunes to like Disney songs, like Under the Sea, that sort of thing. And then as a young man, I got into like metal, like I was listening to Metallica. I got into like early Sabbath, Megadeth, Led Zeppelin, of course, that sort of thing. So I basically kind of, rock and roll, metal, that sort of thing. But then from there, it's kind of evolved. So, and I've listened to everything, but now I basically just play sort of rock and folk and kind of jammy sort of stuff, whatever. Some of it's kind of heavier, some of it's like just me and an acoustic, but I don't know. I just like creating, I mean, that's like you were saying with the having your own little studio. It's great because it isn't like a live band, so you don't get that feeling. And I miss that a little bit. But the cool thing about doing it yourself is that you don't have to worry about the drummer showing up drunk or late, or the bass player's like, oh, he cheated on his girlfriend and she's going to come in and screaming, and all of that sort of stuff. So you don't have to deal with like the bar owner not paying you at the end of the night. Been there, that sort of stuff. So I don't know, it's cool, but I enjoy the hell out of it. And it's basically, I enjoy the process of creating. Like it's all about making a song, really. um
The
I
whole
could,
the whole thing of like having an idea in your head, and then when it actually comes together, and it came from like it was scratch. It started from scratch, and all of a sudden, like you have this song that's this beautiful thing, and it's pretty amazing. And I've talked a lot about it on the show about how I feel like we're all capable of being creative. Like I'm sure as a musician, sometimes you get people say this to you where they're like, oh, I could never do that, or I could never write a song, or I could never, they're basically saying I could never be that creative. And a lot of that is just because, I mean, I think we're all inherently creative, when we're kids, and then little by little the school systems and society says, hey, that's a waste of time. Stop focusing on stuff that's not going to financially get you ahead. Focus on, just being book smart, which means just regurgitating information to get, past the next grade and get a good paying job and whatnot. And I've talked about this study on the podcast before, and there was Hunter Motz, a past guest who's been on a bunch, and he talked about how they would ask young kids, I don't know if it was kindergarten, preschool, whatever it was, but really young kids, like, how many of you find yourself to be creative? And like they all raised their hands, and like every grade, as they asked that question, less and less kids raise their hands. And it makes perfect sense, because you imagine like kindergarten, first grade, like everybody's like coloring and doing things that involve being creative and imagination, and as time goes by you do less and less of that. So it's almost like musicians and artists just in general, even if it's podcasters or whatever type of art you might be doing, it's just people who just never stop doing it, right? We all did it when we were kids, and then some of us stopped and some of us continue doing it. But I definitely feel like a piece of me would be missing if I did, or at least I'd have a a worse understanding of the world, because there's something about creating an imagination, and especially music and arts, where it forces you to reflect a little bit. It forces you to kind of like, even when you're writing a song, for example, I'm sure you go through this where it forces you to be honest about, how do I really feel about whatever I'm writing about, because that's what you're using, that as your influence, as your motivation for the song. And it's like, so I have to really be honest and dissect, like, how do I feel, and who am I, and all these bigger questions that I think we get lost in, or we forget about a lot as we get older. We just kind of, it's easy to get stuck in that pattern of like going to work and paying your bills, doing your everyday priorities. And not often people will take a step back and be like, okay, what the fuck's is this all about? What is this? And that's why I love your work, and what and I'll stop ranting and let you get.
No, it's all right. I'm agreeing with, yeah. I mean, well, okay. So the music thing is interesting, because I would say that my path towards like spirituality and understanding God and stuff like that was completely coupled with the growth of my creative side. Meaning, the more and more I focused on, like you were saying, because there's a purity and honesty, and there's a certain genuine aspect of creating a song. Like, you can bullshit a song, but you know it. Like, if you want to create something good, or even if you get a spark and you're just following it, you have to follow it to the T, and you have to see the whole thing out. You have to make sure every note and things like that is followed through. Then you have something, and you got, and to me, when you grab that, it's almost like you are, when it's so pure, it's almost like you're a stenographer for the Lord, or something, for the greater spirit. You're grabbing something that isn't form, it's out there, and you're bringing it down and giving it form, and bringing it into materiality, in a sense. And I think the more and more I've done this over the years and focused on it, it's something magical, man. It really is. Even because I've written some really good songs, and I've written hot steaming piles of shit too. You know what I mean? Like, but the really good songs were the ones that I just sat. They came in. I was just paying attention. I just wrote it down. I figured it out, and I just let it go. You know what I mean? And to me, those are very magical moments. So there's a connection there with the divine, with creativity. You also have to, as you're saying, you also have to like do the alchemical vitriol, which is like the visit the interior of the terra and rectify the philosopher's stone. Essentially, you have to go into the darkness of yourself and find that chorus. Like, you just hear intimations of it or whatever, or oh, I can hear a bridge. I can hear it. And it's going to land on the B, so then we can resolve at the C, kind of thing. You can hear it, but you don't know it yet. So you have to search in the darkness, in the interior, and find it. And then you come out with this little stone, this little gem. Oh, there it is, kind of thing, Not only that, like, as you're saying, school, you go into school and you're just basically asked to regurgitate shit. And as you say, like, as you're a child, man, like, no one wants to do that. They want to be creative. They're all those kids are just curious, and they're looking out of the world, and they still have that wonderment in their eyes and things like that. And that's hacked away, over the years. And I've found my connection with music not only helped grow my spiritual side, but it also helped me in like societally and stuff like that. Like I had to learn to be in a band, and which is almost like a relationship with people that were antagonistic, or I was ego driven, or this guy was on drugs, or the drummer was showing up drunk, or and not only that, creating something in that chaos of being young, dumb, and full of cum, as they used to say in Wisconsin, you know what I mean? Full of piss and vinegar, not knowing shit about the world, being, you know, spunky and things like that, having a lot of creative energy and bashing together that same energy with a bunch of young people in a chaotic environment. And still something beautiful grows out of that. So all of those things are lessons that I learned from having a relationship with my creative side, especially musically. And you don't learn those life lessons in a college or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? You have to sort of seek those out. And anyway, so that's all of those things were brought to me by music, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why there's so many things that I think are so necessary as humans. I was raised a Catholic. I'm Portuguese, raised Catholic, and my parents are, they're typical like kind of Catholic Portuguese people where they go to church, they don't really ask the bigger questions, but they go there because they feel like they're doing their part and they want to believe in something. And so I was always kind of I don't know. I'm just like, this whole thing's ridiculous. I'm like, they don't even know what they believe. They don't have any real strong understanding of the Bible or the stories or any of this stuff. And I kind of rebelled. I was the typical like metalhead rebelled. I just wanted to wear my Iron Maiden shirt to school and listen to satanic music because it was going against the grain and I just liked anything that was going against the grain. And religion didn't have a place for people like that. And then as I got older, right, I realized like, oh shit, I left one team, like the religious team, to join another team, which I was sold that it wasn't a team, and that's the atheist team. And I'm like, we have ideologies, extreme ideologies, just like the other team, and we're just more oblivious to it. We think, we think that the religious group is judging people, and we're not, but we're judging them for being religious. It's like all these things where you realize they're the same thing. And then as I got older, I started realizing the benefits of religion, and not so much because I'm still, I'm not a religious person, but the benefits in regards to many people, if they didn't have it, they would never have the opportunity or a reason to ask those bigger questions that I think are so important. The like, why are we here? What are we doing here? What's life all about? And really just even things like just understanding that there's more to life than just financially getting ahead, being good to people and just being able to look in the mirror and having a decent moral compass and all those type of things. So I kind of started getting a more of appreciation for it as I got older. I know you've obviously studied religion. Well, you were raised, I believe, weren't you raised also a Catholic to some sense, or were you not religious? I think actually.
no, my extended family on both sides is extremely Catholic, like Irish on one side. So hanging out with the McNallys and O'Shea's and stuff like that. So very, they came from Catholic Protestant, obviously Irish, but they were Catholic. So they came over here Catholic. And then my mom's side her last name is Svoboda. And so that's very Eastern, Slovakian. And so that was very Catholic there as well. So both of them, yeah, Catholic side, but I wasn't raised Catholic because, I mean, the same sort of thing that happened to you, less in a rebellious sense, but same thing happened to me as a young man that happened to you. Turn to these other things because the religion wasn't making sense. But the same sort of thing happened to my parents because they were told to always go to church and do all these things and follow the rituals and read the thing and do this and all that sort of shit. And there was no answer to any of it. None of it ever made any sense to them. They didn't get anything out of it besides the fact that it was supposed to be, sort of a community thing. But, in big city Chicago, they're really, that community is obviously it's a city community. It's not a real community, you know what I mean? In that sort of sense. So they fell away from religion. And so as a young man, I was like the same thing with you. I was presented religion. And to me, religion, the whole point of it was like, oh, it's to provide answers as to where you are, what you're doing here, where you're going to go, what's after, all the big things. And I went to those as a young man, as a rebellious young man, just like yourself. And it was like, they're not providing any answers. They're just saying, do this shit. Well, I was smart enough back then to be like, that's ridiculous. No, I want actual answers, you know? And I actually didn't want answers at the time. I intuitively I did, but really I was just chasing skirts and smoking weed and drinking too much Huberbach beer. But ultimately I was on that quest. Even as a young man, I just didn't really know it because I was already acting out, just like you were. I was like, this is, I mean, to say this, one of my favorite bands as a young man just happened to be a band called Faith No More. You know, if that doesn't say anything, because I didn't have faith in any of that shit. There was nothing to have faith in the religions or anything. And so, yeah, I turned to music. But then, as you were saying, it's like, oh, those the literalist fundamentalist Christians who had that idol worship with Jesus Christ, because that's exactly what it is with those churches. They're worshiping Jesus Christ as an idol. And that's exactly what you're not supposed to do. Icons, idols. Well, with the rock star, metalhead, Slayer, Faith No More, but they just gave you a rock icon, a star to worship. And because I remember as a young man, I remember seeing Phil Anselmo, of the lead singer of Pantera, shirt off, ripped, unscarred, and he's in front of a million people in Russia being like, domination. I was like, fuck yeah, I want to do that, you know? But that was just a replacement. I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. I wanted to be me and find an actual truth. And neither one of those, they were both presented as like, here you go. And neither one of them were the actual path. So,
yeah, there is something about the power of being in a crowd like that at a metal show or any type of show. And I can see, like, I remember watching, like, growing up watching, like, the DNC and the RNC, and, like, they would just say, you know, the most, like, cookie cutter type shit that you've heard a billion times, but everybody was cheering like it was so profound. Like, we're going to go out and we're going to win this election. We're going to make America this, or we're going to do this for the middle class. And everybody's, like, clapping and going crazy. And I'm like, what is this group think? And then, you know, I started relating it to a concert where, like, you can get caught up in the energy of the concert, where if the lead singer says, everybody, you know, like, you know, circle pit or whatever, everybody starts doing the circle pit. You know, it's like you get caught up in the whole, like, just group think, or just the feeling in the room, and I don't know. I can see how people can get caught up in that type of thing. Religion and churches, I can see very similar. Everybody's singing together. There's this community. There's this connection to one another. You're all there for the same purpose. You're enjoying the same thing, and I think it brings people together. And it's not always bad. I think, you know, obviously the Catholic Church gets, and rightfully so, a lot of crap for hiding pedophiles and all the cover-ups and all this stuff. But like my last guest on the show was his name's Craig Sawman Sawyer, and he did the documentary called Contraland, and he's a veteran and super hardcore Christian guy who he's made his life work to get all these like ex-Navy SEAL guys, and they're just basically hunting human traffickers. And so it's like, in a way, like, some people blame religion for, you know, for obviously some crimes like that, and rightfully so. And then in other cases, people who are very religious are fighting those same people. So like, one thing I've come to grips with, like, growing up and just really thinking about these things, is that a lot of times we blame the religion or the ideology for the bad things and negativity that's linked to it, but most of the time it's just somebody taking advantage of that ideology to manipulate people or control people or to justify their actions. And did you find that to be the case?
I mean, what you're saying is spot on, because there's nothing wrong with going to like a hard rock show or a metal show or something like that, or even a church setting, because there's a lot of goodness there. In no way am I trying to, like, you know, castigate or whatever that situation, because community's good, getting together with people and recognizing there's something greater, that sort of thing in a church setting is great. Rock and roll shows the same thing. I mean, I remember back in the day, I went and saw Government Mule, Warren Haynes, and this was at the Barrymore Theater in Madison, Wisconsin. I was like literally right. I mean, it was Warren Haynes right there, and I was right here. And there's this pedal board right there. And the guy, you know, people's like, rock and roll's evil or something. But the guy was pouring his fucking heart out, man. You know, I could see it. I could see the sweat pouring on him, and he was just spirit rolling out of that, you know. The difference is to recognize what's going on and being like, okay, I can channel that spirit, or I can absorb that energy and things like that and lift me higher, as opposed to like, oh, That's my goal. I want to be that rock star, that icon, or it's like the church is not really the church in that sort of sense. You can go there for the spiritual uplifting, to be re-energized, to get some good philosophy, to meet with your neighbors, or to concert, same sort of thing. You can go and hang out with your friends, get that great moment, but that is not the thing in and of itself. And I think in our culture, a lot of these things are presented, especially to young men like you and I, as replacements. Is be like, oh, actually go seek out this. Try to be Lady Gaga, little Tiffany. That's what you want to do in life. Don't you want to be a little monster like her? And instead of seeking, no, I want to seek something greater and higher than that. You know what I mean? That might be a convoluted little discussion, but you get the point, right? I think.
Yeah, yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, it's funny you saying like the way that some Christians look at Jesus as like this iconic person, and their whole lives revolve around this one specific person, and almost more than all the other things that come with it, right? Almost more than the morals or the philosophies or anything else that's a part of Christianity. And yeah, I mean, ideologies in general. And I just did a podcast with Daniele Vignelli not too long ago, this Italian philosopher, and he was, he said it, and it's so true. Like this idea that like ideologies are dangerous. They're all, they're inherently bad almost, because it almost stops the progression of your thinking and questioning, because you've almost got to a point where you're like, I've subscribed to this one, and this is where I'm planting my flag. So I'm pretty much done. I've decided on this issue or this topic. I'm good to go. Like I can move on to the next thing. And I think I think that's okay for if it's temporary. If you've decided that like, okay, I'm okay with saying like, at the moment, I'm not married to any ideas, but at the moment, this is where I stand. This is what makes the most sense. But I'm open to discussing other possibilities and exploring other ideas. So yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, the concern about any ideology, is that there's always the fear of stopping your thought progression.
In a sense, I don't mean this as a blanket statement, but in a sense, yeah, I would totally agree with Bilali. I mean, ideologies are essentially bullshit, because it's just, when you look at the word, it's just an idea. I got an idea, and I've got and ology means, it comes from Logan, or Logian, study of. It's basically, that's the etymology of it. So it's basically the study of ideas. Okay, well, everybody can have some schmuck idea about something, like, and so when you're actually seeking truth, you're not seeking ideas and you're not seeking theories. You're seeking proofs and theorems about this world. That's actually what religions should provide you, are answers, proofs, evidence, and theorems. Okay. And actually, the Holy Bible even says that. It's one thing, it really sort of knocked me on my feet when I read it. It's Hebrews 11:1. It says, oh, what does it say? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I have faith. I have faith. Well, according to the Bible, it says you need evidence then. And that's what should be provided to you. Ideologies, necessarily, some might provide some evidence, but they're just ideas. I don't really care about your idea. I got a good idea. Okay, is your idea based in truth? Is it demonstrable? Is it repeatable? Okay, then we got something. So I totally agree with them. I'm not a big ideology fan. I'm really not. In fact, well, that's all I need to say about that. I think he's spot on. I think he's spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that we don't really think about a lot. I was listening to a Lex Freeman podcast, and I forget who he had as a guest, but they were talking about like philosophy in the classical sense of like, their intriguement with it is because it's constantly asking questions, and that's always been my intriguement with philosophy, was that I like the idea of always asking questions, always debating questions, never really coming to a conclusion in regards to saying like, yeah, this is the thing well, you can come to a conclusion, but being open to debating those conclusions and being open to exploring different conclusions and ideas, and I think people need more of that. And in regards to like your soul searching and kind of going into even with music, I know you've seen first of all, one thing I love about you is that there's no rabbit hole you're not willing to go down. I mean, your documentaries, you've done documentaries on probably just about all the most controversial topics there are, and actually it's funny because I was looking for some. Are your documentaries for the most part, are they all just scraped from YouTube, or are they available anywhere else? Because
Everything is straight for YouTube. So everything is at martyleeds33.com. That's basically been the hub. So when we moved a couple of years ago, I set that site up because, I'd already been censored and we saw what was coming, and so we wanted to set it up and I wanted to be off of like Patreon and everything. So I basically just set up my homepage. I was like, I'm going to have everything there because at the time I didn't know like it was BitChute or library or what, because there's all these sites popping up and people are going. So I was just like, well, for right now, martyleeds33.com, and so it's just the best way to support and then see everything. Everything is there. So
awesome. Yeah, because you did, I loved your Flat Earth documentary. I sent that to a lot of people, and I'm like, this is without a doubt the best documentary on this topic because you didn't attack people. You didn't, you just made it a real logical argument and just really just to me the flat earth thing is almost a great way of knowing how open people are to being wrong or open to challenging their perspective on the world, because if you immediately say I will not watch anything on the topic whatsoever, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And actually I think you guys talked about this when you were on Sam Tripoli, our mutual friend, Sam Tripoli, Tinfoil Hat podcast, when you're on there. This idea that people just say like, yeah, this is true and that isn't, and they haven't once like looked into like, well, what evidence do you have that that's true? What have you looked into it? Have you researched it? Have you gone to the origin of this idea, which I think is super important. Actually, I was just listening to the podcast with you and re-listening to it with you and Sam Tripoli, coincidentally, because I know you're very good at picking up on coincidences and pattern recognition. He references the Ripple Effect podcast on that show. Actually, when he interviewed you, something I forgot what he said. He's like, "Oh, I was just on the Ripple Effect podcast, and this came up." I'm like, "That's so funny," because I'm having him on, and I'm like, I didn't even realize that happened. So, but yeah, it to me, it's almost like a test. Like, hey, will you watch this? And if somebody says, no, that's ridiculous, I'm like, why not? Like, you're not open to the fact that you can be wrong. Have you not been wrong before? Or do you think the elite couldn't lie to you about something? And I'm not saying I subscribe to any any which way. I just think that, especially when you're in the world of alternative media or alternative history or research, whatever term you want to use, there's so many things that seem too fucking crazy to have any real truth to, and then you look into it and you're like, holy crap, there's something here, so with that said, that's why there's no theory that I won't at least explore a little bit.
okay, let's see what I want to say about this. No, it's interesting because before we were talking, you were saying about like, people like having all sorts of questions, and always philosophizing and theory, that sort of stuff, and that's good because that's healthy debate and putting everything on the table for consideration, basically, right? Like the whole idea for me is like the internet and having open discussions and scientific dialogue and stuff like that is like, look, this is an open marketplace of ideas. You don't just get to shut down one marketplace over here because they're like, so in my opinion, an actual truth seeker or whatever you want to say goes into the marketplace of ideas and stops by every station and be like, what do you got? Let's see. Oh, that's kind of interesting. It's like, well, I'm not going over there. That to me is ridiculous. So to me, I'm like, I want to see everything. I'm a math guy. I'm not going to just see 359 degrees of that circle. I'm going to see all 360. And then I'm going to go to the middle and see what it looks like in the middle because I want to see all aspects of it. I think that's healthy thinking. Number one, it just is. So when I see somebody that denies that, I'm like, no, you're just putting walls up in your brain. That's all. Even if it's all bullshit, go explore it. How entertaining is it to explore flat Earth, whether you believe in it or not? Just for that, So to me, I'm always open for things like that. The other thing I want to say is this: is that the point of truth seeking, though, is to find truth. Is to find things that we can like grasp and hold in our hands in the world that we experience, like in our total experiential reality. Like there's so many things that are whatever, epistemological or whatever. There's things you just can't pinpoint that we're never going to know. But there are things that we can know. We can come to know and absolutely firmly recognize. Flat Earth is one of them, meaning that there's nothing that you can show me that says that we're spinning at 1,037.5 miles an hour right now. Everyone I've ever spoken to ever has never felt the Earth spin. There's no way to calculate, et cetera, et cetera. There are things you can come to that are proofs, you know? So there are things like that that we can rest our laurels on or whatever, because it's not resting on an idea. It's not resting on, I've got a good notion. I've got a good theory. No, these are proofs. This is A squared plus B squared equals mother frickin' C squared kind of thing. So when my search, long before I even started on the internet, when I went into a search for truth and reality, I came to those things. I was like, well, there's a lot that you're not going to know, and there's questions and there's theories and stuff like that. So where did I go to find proofs? Where do you go to find proofs? Mathematics. That's where you find proof. Oh, you can't tell me that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you add those together, it's not going to equal 28. There's nothing that you can tell me. There's nothing that you can provide that says anything else. So to me, those were like, oh, I can set a foundation here. Then you realize, I mean, especially after the many years of researching this stuff, you realize that all the great sages, all the great mystics, all the great philosophers, all the great theologians, they were all polymaths, all of them. All of them. You can go down the list. Every Kabbalist you could ever know, every great whatever theologian and mystic, from Saint Augustine to frickin' whatever, they were polymaths. Da Vinci, which means that they understood the math of behind all things, because every science that you do, ultimately you have to deal with mathematics at some point. Doesn't matter what science it is, and prove me wrong. So
Yeah,
anyway.
and I remember there was and I know neither of us are real big fans of his Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I remember there was, and I can't remember where he was, but there he was on some panel or something like that, and they were talking about how there's some mathematical way, or there's some math that describes nature, or there's some math equation in nature or something like that. They were kind of open to this idea and discussing this, and that was always fascinating, because when you look at like even something as simple as, and I guess you could consider it math, like what makes somebody attractive, like their perfectly proportioned face, it's all math,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. In fact, they've done like analyses on this sort of stuff. There was like when like Brad Pitt or whatever. Why is he so attractive to so many people or whatever? Well, number one, he's pushed out by propaganda outlets and hey, this guy's attractive. So there's that whole angle. But no, he's got a perfectly symmetrical face. It's like this sort of like, that it's yeah, there's actually math to it, There's math to how you grow. There's math to how I don't want to even go down that rabbit hole, but everything from how a plant grows, how you grow. You're grown out of the proportion of phi. Your arms are your arm length is your height. Your arm is a cubit, which is phi. Your hand is phi. This is what I mean when we go and we ruminate and ponder on the nature of existence. We do good philosophy. Even the word philosophy is a reference to the phonetics of phi and phi. And that is math. That's proportion. That's ratio. That's design. That's all of that sort of stuff. And so this is what I mean when we seek out truths in our world. There's a lot that we can't know. We're too small-minded. We're not God in that sense. We're not the great oneness of the whole thing that can see everything. We're not that. We're this minuscule little part of it. But there are things we can come to know, and those are the things that I try to focus on, in the books and things. So
How does it help you? I mean, well, you talked about how language, there's a lot of like hidden what there's a relation to numbers with most languages, right? And then also the English language. I've heard you say that like we don't really even know the origin of language, which is something that you would think I could Wikipedia it and find that information, but it's something that we use every day. It's taught at schools. You would just assume that we could get to the origin of it, like who created it, how was it created, and all this stuff. But there's not even any real information on where it came from and the roots of it, the origin of it, which means that we don't know what intentions they had, or if they were hiding things in the language or the alphabet or things like that, right?
I mean, this is the thing too, is that for the longest time, looking at language, like here we are, it's how we communicate with each other. We explain our reality to each other in the language of our native tongue, whatever it is, right? And that could be whatever, whatever, Farsi over here and Italian over here, whatever, right? And yet no one knows where it comes from. There's no way you can search back in the annals of history or whatever and say, oh, this is where this established. We don't have an objective historical record. Even if you claim to have an objective historical record, then you would have to trust the history of men writing shit down for how many years. I don't trust that. So we have no idea where it comes from. We have no idea, etc. Like, I mean, just all of those infinite questions, and you're not going to get answers to those things. And this is what I mean by there's this whole sort of, whatever map of things that we can know and not know. Where language comes from, that's a big who knows. And you're not going to get that answer. The only thing you could say is God, I guess, or whatever. So to me, going into all of this stuff was not like, oh, okay, well, I can't know the origin. I don't know who formed it. I don't know who made it. We've got, once again, intimations throughout history about maybe who, like, oh, John Dee did this or whatever. Still, you can't ever know. So the only thing you can do is sort of, what do you say, reverse engineer it. So the only thing you can do is look at it and be like, well, is there structure here? Right? I don't know the origin. I don't know how it was formed. I don't know who made it. I don't know where all it comes from. I don't know its evolution. I can't prove any of that stuff. Can I look at it now and say, is there form here? Well, you can do that with Greek. You could do that with Hebrew. You can do it with the abjad system. And I'm saying you can absolutely do it with English, where you can look at it and say, just no different than somebody hands you a radio and you're like, oh, what is this thing? Is this form and function? Does it work? Does it have a purpose? If I turn this thing on and all you have to do is now I could take that radio apart and be like, oh, there's fucking dials and there's the speakers and this is the little circuit board and this is how this thing works. I can see this does have design. You can do that with these languages. And these are very, very prominent languages. So once again, when we go to ruminate and ponder, it's like, there's things we can't know, but there are things we can know. Some of those things are, at this point, it's like proof beyond proof that there's at least a septenary cipher absolutely attached to the English language, that you can get mathematical constants directly from it that no mathematician, and I challenge any mathematician to show up at my door and tell me that pi, tau, and squaring numbers and squaring the circle and the geometry of the cube is not encoded in our language. I happily will debate any mathematician you show up at my door because it's there. And it's those things that are irrefutable. It's things that are like, does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, does that, if you add that, does that equal 28? Yes, it does. Can anyone refute that? No. So those are the things that I like to focus on,
So what have you learned from some of these discoveries? Because so some people would say, okay, you find these patterns, right? Or you find these things that seem to be not coincidental. But what do you feel like you have uncovered, in this journey of like finding these patterns and finding these things? Is there anything that you're like, okay, this is my understanding of myself or the world around me has become clear because of these things? I can kind of see that there's something bigger here. And maybe, because I always say, like, life's like this giant puzzle, and every time you kind of learn something, you discover something, you uncover something, it's one more piece of that puzzle. And at the end of our journey, we might not have all those pieces, so we don't know what the image is of that puzzle, but maybe we have enough pieces where we can have a idea of what it could be. Do you have have you discovered some things, you think, from all your research? I'm sorry, that's kind of a question.
No, it's a great question. And I'll say this, because I know this sounds like arrogant or whatever. And maybe, I don't know how this sounds. I'm just going to say it, so whatever. But like, I know who I am. I feel like I know where I came from. I know what Earth is. I know why Earth was created. I know what, at least in the drama of the human experience, I know why Earth is created. I know why human beings are here. I know this is a spiritual quest. This is essentially a rites of passage. I know this is where souls come to do their journey, to create their perfected stone, to get home, if you will. I feel like now, because of studying this, I can pretty much look at, if I study it and give it time, I can look at pretty much any mythology and be like, oh, this is what they mean. And I once again, I know that sounds like crazy, like whatever, egotistical or something, but we do the lectures on the channel. Like I just did the Kabbalah of Norse mythology. Now, if you went to most Norse people and be like, hey, did you know that there's clearly Kabbalistic elements throughout the entire canon of Norse myth? Most people would be like, what are you talking about? I'm saying that like you can look at that now and be like, oh, this is what they mean. This is what in general, you can get specific archetypal themes and you can find them repeated throughout Native American mythology, Hindu, Norse. And so for me, it's like, I always, okay, so I'll say it this way. I always went into this stuff because they were a mystery, right? And I'm saying that now I feel like after years and years of doing this, I can actually go in and they're less of a mystery. And it's more like, they're still mysterious, of course. There's lots of things I don't understand, but there's very key elements that I can pull out and be like, this is what they're talking about. This is why there's 9 here. This is why he hung on upside down on a tree. This is why he's upside down. This is why Emer was a man and a woman. This is why the Yggdrasil is a tree in the middle of things. This is what, etc. You know, and so if you would have asked me to do that 8 years ago, I'd have been like, I have no idea, bro. But now it's like, yeah, I mean, isn't the whole point of this thing, sorry, I'm ranting.
Right.
Isn't the whole point of this freaking thing to find out why you're here? Like, what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? Well, it's 42. Seriously. But yeah, and so to me, it's like, I found that. And maybe I just found it for me, but people also come to my site because I have some decent insights into all of these things. So there's that, you know.
So
I was seeking proof of God, and let's just say this, oh boy, did I find it. Holy shit, did I find it in ways that I had no idea ever existed.
well, that's
Didn't
what
even know existed.
I was going to ask you, like, so what came first? Did you find yourself being more spiritual and then you started uncovering these things, or did you start going down this rabbit hole of finding these patterns and that led you to be more spiritual?
Knock and it shall be opened unto you, ask and you shall receive. That's what I was doing. Now I wasn't I view the world through the Christian mythos, right? So I'm a Gnostic Christian. So whenever I seek out understandings, I usually go to the Bible. You know, that doesn't mean that I reject the other religions, things like that. But when I first started, I was studying all sorts of religions, right? I've studied Egyptology and Hindu stuff and Grecian myths and blah, 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 blah. When I was studying, I was earnestly wanting to know. Like, I wasn't just like, I wanted to know what this shit meant. And I honestly, earnestly wanted it because I wasn't even necessarily seeking out, what do I want to say? I was seeking out God, but it wasn't like, I'm trying to find God. I just wanted, there was all these mysteries in front of me, alchemy and Freemasonry and Egyptology and all the comparative, you know, mythology stuff. And I was like, what does all this stuff mean? I want a genuine answer. And so I literally went around the circle in the 360 doors and I knocked. I was like, what's in there? And then I went in and I searched. In the analogy of the marketplace of ideas, I stopped at every single one and I tasted the pastries there. You know, I went to every single stand and I was like, what do you got? Let's taste this. Oh, it kind of tastes like shit. Let me taste it again. Oh, that might be decent, you know, that sort of thing. And so that's it. And then as doing that increased my spiritual understanding in a sense. You know, that's all I can say. It was like my spiritual growth was coupled or was analogous to my growth in understanding God, trying to understand the world in a sense.
So it basically happened parallel, right? They were both.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, do you ever watch I'm sure you have, the first Zeitgeist movie? What his Peter Joseph's kind of a perspective on religion. Do you disagree with most of that, all of that, any of it? Or
well, the thing with Zeitgeist is most people were introduced to the idea of like the sun god myth through that. And so people think it's a Peter Joseph thing or something, but even he was like, got a lot of his stuff from Acharya S. And Acharya S got a lot of her stuff from other people, right? Justin Martyr and things like that, right? But when this is the interesting thing. So when I started studying mysticism, alchemy, whatever, like fraternal, Rosicrucian, Masonic, all that sort of stuff, endless amounts of people would talk about that stuff. It's not like it was just some wackadoodle idea that Acharya S had and they put it into a documentary. Yeah, I mean, Zeitgeist got a bunch of shit wrong. They did. in that whole period. They made claims that were not true. But the idea that an archetypal sun god isn't prevalent in cultures across the world is ridiculous. I mean, it's everywhere. You know, I mean, you once again, you can go. I mean, and I actually just did a whole chapter on my new book on this, and I literally listed like 20 of them and showed and actually went in and said, these are the characteristics. And a lot of them weren't born on December 25th and stuff like that, but clearly the same elements, same themes, same numbers, sort of thing. So to me, I wanted an answer for that. Because most Christians would just be like, no, there's only Jesus. You got to get rid of that. It has nothing to do with Horus and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, no, there's a ton of connecting threads here. What does that mean? Well, then you get past all of the cultural pretenses and all that sort of thing, and you get to what's actually there. And that is a fundamental wisdom tradition. That is what we say is a science of salvation. As we say, it's a universal, literally wisdom tradition that's in the fabric of nature. It's innate within the creation. And that's what every single one of those cultures were doing. They were coming to that and they realized, oh, no, there's science behind that. And by science, I mean repeatable, demonstrable, verifiable information. A squared plus B squared equals C squared is what I'm saying. Not like, oh, I got a good idea. You know, that's what those people were doing. And I'm saying now we can go in and we can pick apart these myths and be like, Kabbalah is absolutely in the Norse. Yes, Jesus Christ is a sun god, and there's no problem with that. That's not worshiping the sun. It's recognizing that there is a grand order and design of this creation. And the way that people, ancient cultures, recognized it was, well, the easiest way that God gave us. Put a bit of big light in the sky. It did its pattern 24 hours, and then it did a 365-day pattern. And then people saw that. It's like, oh, there's a rise, there's a fall, there's a change. Hey, there's order here, you know? And so that's what these cultures were doing. Yeah. And they wrapped it up almost, you know, not like verbatim, but similar themes again and again and again. And they're impossible to, if you're honest, once again, if you're honest, if you're going to open the doors and actually go in and see what's in that degree, whatever, right? Of the 360, if you're honest, you can't deny them. You're a fool to deny them. So.
Yeah, it is. Well, he, in a way, I think he was. It's been a long time since I watched that documentary, but was he? I think he was trying to make the argument that a lot of this was just used and over again to control people was one aspect of it. And I mean, I'm assuming you kind of disagree with that.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, so I disagree with his thing that it's used for control, but religions are used for control. Absolutely. That's, I mean, in that sense, anything can be used for control. Once again, if you're evil and you have those, you know, and religion is a great way to do that, of course, because if you go into religion and you undercut its main message, then you harangue people with bringing people into church. It's a tradition. It's a ritual. I got to do this. Grandma Tiffany would be so mad if you didn't go to church this Sunday, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then what you do is you manipulate that, the real message, the real search for God. And it just becomes this vacant, vacuous sort of thing that people just go in. And like you're saying, people would go there, they just do the thing and pray and do the baptism, and that's it. It's just, you know, going through the motions, you know? So yes, religions are used for that. His argument, I think, is nonsense, though, that religions are just conspiracy, in other words. And it's all just conspiracy in the sun to get you to believe nonsense. No, that's he's missing the entire mystical aspect of these religions. That's what happens. Acharya S doesn't know anything about the true mysticism behind Christianity. Neither does Peter Joseph. Neither does what's his face. Caesar's Messiah. I don't know if you know that guy. I can't think of his name. Anyway, he wrote a book basically saying that Christian religion is a conspiracy, and what those people lack complete understanding of, is the mystical aspect of all of it. They don't understand a lick of it, none of it. And so it's easy for them to be like, look, it's a conspiracy. Look what it's doing to the people. It's brainwashing them. Well, that's true. Absolutely, it's true. But that's not its purpose, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's there's a great podcast that I've referenced it a few times on my show because not too many people have heard it, and even though it's two pretty famous people, with Dan Carlin and Sam Harris. And Sam Harris, obviously, we know where he stands on religion, and it's supposed to be just like a friendly kind of swap cast. They spoke both were going to share it on their platforms, but it kind of turned into this debate. And a really interesting debate because Sam Harris was kind of blaming, like typical Sam Harris, blaming all the most awful things in the world on religion, and Dan Carlin could kind of see through that as a historian and say, well, throughout history, there's always been violent people who are going to find ways to motivate people to, or violent people are going to do violent things and then say it's because of the name of this person, it's in the name of that person, or it's for the king, it's for the queen. Like there you could find tons of violence throughout history, motivated by all different types of ideologies or justifications. So you can't just say it's always religion, or religion inherently is what sparks these type of things. So it was a really interesting conversation, and I think that's an important thing for people to understand, is just this idea that, like, same thing with, like, the terrorist groups and 9/11, who in the alternative media community doesn't know what some of the information about 9/11. I mean, you look at the hijackers, right? We called them like Muslim extremists, and yet they're at like strip clubs doing coke with strippers and, like, I think one of them like purchased a book like Islam for Dummies or something like that. It's like these guys, a lot of these people that will do these acts sometimes are not the most strict religious people, and yet will use that to justify their acts, which I think is incorrect, and there's much more there.
Well, I don't have much to say about Sam Harris. I think, I mean, to be honest, at this stage of the game, if you're a professional out there, like the Sam Harrises and the Daniel Dennett's and the what's the guy's name?
Dawkins and
Yeah, Dawkins, right? That sort of thing. If you're a professional out there claiming that there's no evidence for God, I'm sorry, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. I'm sorry. Even in the heliocentric model about the fact that we're like the third planet from the sun and we're in the Goldilocks zone and it's just hot enough and just cold enough for biological life forms to exist and have existed for 3.75 billion years, whatever the hell it is. You're saying that human life or life on this planet, whatever you believe in your model, has lasted for almost 4 billion years, and there's not an intelligent hand behind it doing it, even in your model. The atheist agnostic argument is so beyond the pale of stupid. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to come down on it, but this is the thing I always say. You're using your own intelligence to look at the nature from which you were born and say it's unintelligent. Think about that. One philosophical question or argument, you as an atheist or agnostic are saying, I'm intelligent. I'm using my intelligence to say that the nature from which I was born is not intelligent. Where did your intelligence come from?
Well, I think he would make the argument that he's evolved in time, and obviously, if you look at our primitive ancestors, we've evolved and become more intelligent in time. It wasn't something that happened overnight. I have a much bigger problem with the Dawkins and Rich, Harris and Hitchens and all these guys, and especially in regards to like foreign policy, because their dislike of religion blinds them so much in regards to just seeing through the propaganda. Christopher Hitchens, I remember reading his book, The Trials of Henry Kissinger, and watching a documentary, and I'm like, oh my God, Henry Kissinger is an awful person. You're like, look at all his war crimes, and look at the fact that they're always selling the public one thing, and really they had other hidden agendas. And then the Iraq War came around, and Christopher Hitchens is on TV doing interviews saying we have to go there. They're brutal, primitive people, and this and that. And I'm just like, wait, I thought like you understood like war propaganda and all this, but your dislike of religion is so strong that blinded you from the fact that you could be manipulated into believing that this extremism is the root of all evil, and it's caused strictly by their religion. And maybe there could be other factors, like the fact that we've been bombing the shit out of them forever. We've been destabilizing the Middle East forever. There's all these, we've created countries and put people who don't like each other together. There's all these other aspects of it that are ignored, because these people like Christopher Hitchens just believes that, like, no, what causes all this isn't any of those things. It's just the religion itself. It's inherently going to cause violence, and it's violent, and people are going to be extreme, and all this stuff, and to be a logical person, you have to be atheist. And I just think that it's a silly argument, and it's a dangerous one, because it's really easy to look at those people. And that's the other thing too, is just how little we understand of other people's religion or spirituality or what they believe in. All these things, I mean, to me, it boggles my mind how quickly we'll we'll look at a Muslim country and just be okay with bombing them, because we just don't understand. We assume that the TV is telling us that they're all violent because of their religion, and we just assume it's correct, and uh not look at it from the perspective of, okay, let me self-reflect. If I'm a Christian, then somebody blows up an abortion clinic, doesn't represent all Christians, just like somebody who blows himself up and says it's because of Islam doesn't represent everybody who's a Muslim, So I think that I don't even know what my point is, but I think my point is that it's dangerous to pigeonhole um, these religions, and to better understand them, and to meet people of them, and get a understanding of what they believe in and what this stands for from the people. Because I have Muslim friends, I have Christian friends, Catholic friends. When I talk to them, it's a much different interpretation than the interpretation that most of the time TV, for their own propaganda purposes, are selling you.
Well, I'm okay. So there's a few things here. Number one, I understand the idea of like looking at religions and then being like, oh, I don't believe in God because I'm looking at the religions and they're all crazy and blah, blah, blah. And they don't make sense. And the people are nuts and they do stupid shit, blah, 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 blah. I understand that impulse or whatever, right? Because that was, or when I was a young man, that's essentially what happened. I looked at the religions and they were crazy, right? But the thing that I can't stand, and Sam Harris does this, and Christopher Hitchens, rest in peace, but he did this as well. But it was like to look at the religions, say they're crazy, and then that says God is nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Like that's to me is a non sequitur. Well, there's a billion. How many religions are out there in the world? How many like indigenous cultures that have their own things and blah blah blah, all sorts of beliefs in God and all over the world, right? And then to say, well, oh, I can't make sense of any of those. They're all crazy and stuff like that. So therefore, any belief in God is crazy. Well, that's to me is just terrible philosophy. Terrible, because that means you didn't actually go into the world and be like, well, is there element for design here? Can I prove that this thing was created at all? Is there enough evidence for that sort of thing? No, you went to the religion, said that they were crazy, and then that equates to God's nuts. Belief in God is nuts. Therefore, I have to be an atheist or agnostic. And that's essentially what Sam Harris does. And that's why I can't stand Sam Harris, is once again, Sam Harris knows nothing of mysticism. I'm saying the proof of God is right in front of you, on your hands, right in front of you. And I could show you 10,000 different ways. Do you think Daniel Dennett or Stephen Hawking's, or may he rest in peace, or whatever, all these people, do you think that they know any of that? No.
Well, it's weird.
Interesting thing, and one more thing too. It's interesting thing about the religious argument is because guys like Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens are like, oh, it's the religions that you have to do. Okay, well, I mean, the Iraq War was a Zionist war. I mean, it was based on a religion's eschatology. So let's just say this: a religion that has a lot of power, that has an eschatology where people are enslaved or millions are killed, that can be dangerous. That in one sense is like, no, that's religion that's dangerous. You mean to tell me that in your belief, you're chosen or people are enslaved, and at the end, everyone dies except your people? What? That's dangerous in any eschatology or any belief system, especially if that got control. So there's room to say, hey, religions can be a problem. And I think religions can actually be antithetical to bring you to God in some respects too. But to blame all religions for everything you're just saying is complete nonsense. The people that are behind religions that use them, they don't give a shit about Catholicism, and they don't care about that. They're working for a different, force or whatever.
Well, and they're
So
using it as a tool to just control people. I mean, that's kind of where the Zeitgeist movie, regardless, if you're atheist or if you're religious, they kind of got right. I mean, it doesn't mean like if you come to the conclusion that some people are or many people are using religion to control people or convince people to act a certain way or do certain things, it doesn't discredit anything else. It doesn't discredit like like you said, a god. It doesn't discredit. It doesn't mean that there can't be. Religion is man-made. What you're talking about is much deeper than that. It's not. You're not talking about just man-made stuff. You're talking about stuff that could be possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say to that, that's a perfect point, because what I'm saying is that yes, religions are man-made. These stories and these myths and things like that, and the books and the scripture and all in the whatever, the buildings and the architecture, yes, all of that is man-made. But when you get past the veil of it all of those things are actually pointing to something that's not man-made, something that is literally, you can prove that there is a design behind this thing, sort of thing. And that's really sort of the difference. And that's what the Sam Harris and the Daniel Dennett and the blah blah blah, all those guys, they don't have a clue. Or if they do know that, then they're being disingenuous and deceptive and snakes. So,
I
but I think the majority of them don't.
I also think that's what makes them naive to the fact that there could be people who really have incredibly bad intentions in the world. Like when you hear them talk about like foreign policy, oh, you really think somebody did this on purpose or somebody would kill that many people? And from my experience, talking to people like who I just said, my last guest on the show, who's a Christian, Craig Sawyer, talking to people like Jay Dyer, talking to other people who are religious, or believe in a higher power, believe in something greater, believe in a good, which makes it much easier to understand that there could be a evil. Where I think almost like these really scientific, they think they're logical, really scientific people, because they don't believe in a pure good, they also don't believe in a pure evil. So I think a lot of these things, like some of the rabbit holes you've gone down, like the Pizzagate thing, and I've talked to Memory Hold, who's done some great work with Mouthy Buddha on the Pizzagate stuff, and it's not easy to go down these rabbit holes, and when you go down them, and you start uncovering things that are so dark, seem so evil, I think it's much easier to believe those things exist, and those type of people exist, and those type of people could be a huge influencer in the way we're molding the world, and the people who are running the world, when you believe in, I guess, the exact opposite, the good, right? Do you think that's a part of it? Like it's for somebody like yourself, because you believe in the good, it's easier to accept that there must be some evil also.
Well, the further and further you go down the rabbit hole, and I said this a long time ago, like the darker and darker it gets, right? And so the further and further you go down, if you have to be careful, because you have to have enough light to get yourself out. Let me say it this way. Going down the rabbit hole and seeing how dark it is, in a spiritual sense, if you see how dark that can be, you also recognize that there has to be that much light because of the balance of everything in this world. And that's exactly one of the first things the Bible and the allegory tells you. It's like, we ate from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. So for somebody like me, it's like, because I've gone in and studied God so much, like design and order and spirit and creative and stuff like that, I can see the immense good. Like, I can see why God created this, and in the story said it was good, but that also allows me to see the depths of that dark. So in a spiritual sense, like, you see the extreme light, you can see this extreme dark. What the religions tend to do, and a lot of the things in our world tend to do, is keep you in the center there, but not in the center as in like a balanced, perfect Buddha middle path kind of, coincidentia positorum, I'm merged the left and right, just a low buzz in the middle, just a kind of thing. So that way you're like, oh, things are going, things are just generally good and stuff like that. And meanwhile, evil just sort of comes over, and they'll never understand that darkness. You presented that darkness to them, people will just look away, because they can't deal with it. They don't want to think it exists, that sort of thing. And then the scientists, as far as I can tell, they don't even believe that spectrum exists, right? They don't really believe in a universal sort of good and evil, in that, in the sense that it's, like a golden rule sort of thing that's been crafted into the fabric of reality itself. That apparently that's not a thing for them. Okay, well, there you got your problem. People that go into the rabbit hole, that go deep, they come out If they come out at all, they will come out as spiritual people. They'll come out as absolute believers in God, not even believers in saying that there's enough evidence to say that there absolutely is, you know?
Yeah, it's the Pizzagate thing. It's so many people would just dismiss it because they obviously the media did a great job just talking about how it's this one pizzeria and you know this crazy guy went.
It's an underground dungeon, and
And but what's the truth is like, first of all, I'd like to know how, and I should have asked Memory Hole this when he was on my show, but he how do you do the research for this stuff? Because I've thought like so much of this stuff, I'm like, you know, I one thing about the alternative media world is we love the I love, and I think many of us love the uncovering aspect of it. You uncover something, you're like, holy shit! It's like you're connecting the dots. You're like, oh, this is making sense now. Like, oh, I've this get connected to this. I see a link here or whatever. Well, one thing a topic I've never gone too far down the rabbit hole to do that with is the whole Pizzagate child trafficking thing. Obviously, you know, I've had Nick Bryan on. I did a Franklin scandal. I've done stuff on Hollywood pedophilia and stuff like that. But there's stuff that goes way deeper. And when you go way deeper, you got to go to some real sketchy websites and you have to go see some really crazy, sketchy shit. And how the hell do you do that without being concerned? I'm like, I've thought about this. I'm like, how much of this could I look at? And even though I'm doing research and I'm not, it's obviously not for, I mean, I'm a father of two. I have a beautiful daughter and a beautiful son who's 5, my daughter who's 4. And, you know, you're uncovering this stuff and it's like, how, like, why couldn't they pin this on me? You know, because you've seen it in the past where they're just like, you know, there's which shooting was it where they mass shooting where they immediately the brother ends up getting arrested for child porn, and then he got like, oh, it might have been the Vegas shooting where his brother got arrested for child porn,
oh
and
yeah.
and then overnight, like he ends up getting like get let go, and nobody ever talked about it again. But it was a way of like discrediting him. And I'm like, well, I don't know if he had it or not, but if you want to discredit somebody, all you have to do is say there's some child porn on their you know, on their computer, and there they go, they're a crazy person. So that, like, that's always the concern in my head. I'm like, Jesus, I'm like, what if I, you know, click on the wrong link and next thing you know, there's a record of me going to this this website? Or what if I'm a part of some FBI sting, you know, or something like that? Like, are things like that ever crossed your mind when you're doing these
So I keep saying this, but someday I'm going to tell the story of what happened to me when I made the documentary Dear Wolfgang, because there was some shit that happened behind the scenes kind of thing about like we almost had to like threaten to sue a guy just to keep the documentary alive for like a week. And like, anyway, there's a whole bunch of shit that
for people who don't know what
basically,
documentary is, do you,
what's that?
for people who might not know what about that documentary, you mind going into what just a brief description on because that's linked to the Sandy Hook stuff and that whole story, unless you don't want to go into it. And because
No, it's fine. It was just a crazy sort of time. Like
I'm just saying,
basically people that, you know, there's some people, I don't want to say too much because it would be making accusations that I know are true, but you can't really say them. So there, let's just say my website or my documentary was taken down, I think twice. And then another video was taken down that I did on Sandy Hook. And as far as we can tell, it's people directly connected to the FEMA FBI. Okay. Like that's what happened with that whole situation. That was an event. Should we say that? Right. And so the people that were behind that event were directly involved with taking down not only mine, but other people's channels and stuff like that and that sort of thing. So I already know it's like, okay, well, you do any of this stuff, it's like the FBI, FEMA, but they're all gonna, they all got, I mean, that's why the web is created in a sense, right? I mean, it's called a net, it's a web. It's not just a network, you know, it's to catch people, obviously, because they're big fucking spiders. And so I know that, we know that, you know, so let me say that about Sandy Hook. But when I did Pizzagate, so what happened was I got wind of that very early, very, very early on 4chan. And I don't think I've been to, I don't know if I'd ever even been to 4chan at that point, maybe once or twice or something like that. And so I had some friends online that they were really into it. I had a guy at work that was on it, like flies on shit, and just feeding me information nonstop, being like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And this was way early on. early, within a few days of this thing. So at the time, I was just grabbing everything. I was going to every single board chant and just grabbing everything. And as this was going on, collecting all this information, what was happening is we were looking at Instagram sites that were all connected to James Alefantis. And so as this was happening, people were going to these Instagram sites that were friends with him, and left and right they were going. They were deleting people, or the site would go down. And so I have a file, and someday I'll open it up, but I think I still have it anyway. It's a Pizzagate file of all those old files, and I included a bunch of them in the documentary, right? And all social media shit. This is why I wasn't too worried about getting busted, because we were all just taking pictures of stuff that people were posting themselves on social media that was public.
Crazy. How much is this stuff?
Dude, most people think that like Pizzagate was like, they busted John Podesta's emails, or it was whatever, Julian Assange WikiLeaks thing. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And it's ridiculous to say that shit. The things that we saw in those first week, and the people on there, there were people obviously posting pedophilic shit, obviously. And then as soon as they got busted, their stuff was gone. So
you can still find it on Twitter. It's still on Twitter. Chrissy Mayer, who is a stand-up comedian, she has a really popular podcast, and she's been on the show a bunch. She's at one point she was tagging pedophile Twitter accounts, and she's like, Twitter, and this was when like the Twitter was getting a lot of steam for doing the whole censoring conservatives and people on the right and the president. And she's like, well, why the fuck aren't you censoring these? And I clicked on them. I looked at them to see if they were legit, and they were there. And in the comments, you see other people stating, hey, I've already reported this account multiple times to Twitter. Why is this up? And you just see multiple people over and over again. I also reported this account. I also reported this account. All these people reporting these accounts, and yet they're still up. And that's the thing that boggles my fucking mind, is how out in the open some of this stuff is. And I mean, it's out in the open, but in a way, it's almost like you have to like know what to look for, or you have to at least be searching for it, which the majority of us are not. So we might not run into it. But and then also when you put it all together, like in your documentary, when you put it all together, when you see, if you see one image by itself, you accidentally run into somebody's account, you see one thing, not a huge deal. But when you see this image, then that image, and this image, and that image, you're like, okay, this is starting to get real creepy.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, like 10 minutes, something like that. Okay, yeah, I'll be down. Yep, yeah. Sorry, we're having a sale. I'm gonna have to get going here pretty soon. But yeah, crazy amounts of information in that whole thing. There was one Twitter account that I know that they had. They basically went and got all the information about all of these pedophilic accounts, collected it all, sent it to the FBI, and then put it out on Twitter to be like, these are all accounts. I've already reported them to the FBI. They're clearly passing information. They're passing pictures of, not, as far as I know, nothing was done about it. So people think that, pedophile or the Pizzagate is just Hillary Clinton had an underground dungeon and Comet Ping Pong, and she was bringing children there. It's like, no, there were, of course, there's things to question about what was going on in Comet and Ping Pong, but that's not what Pizzagate was about at all. And so for the media to present it like that, and for SNL just did a skit. I don't know if you saw that. It was Papa John's. They did a mock commercial about Papa John's and Papa John's pizza. It was Hillary's Pizza, and come get your child trafficking and blah blah blah. And it was like, obviously mocking it, like, oh, it's just a bunch of people that think Hillary Clinton's devil and they all follow Q. It's like, no, I wasn't, Hillary Clinton is pretty much the devil. But beyond all that, no, I think the rest of your narrative is nonsense. We were all bringing this stuff up saying, go freaking investigate this. We can all go to the site and see that this is happening. Did anything happen? No. But now Pizzagate gets turned into this, oh, you're one of those crazy, kooky conspiracy theorists. So.
Yeah, which is, it's crazy because you figure with the Epstein case finally going, public, and him becoming a household name, finally people would take the topic more seriously. And instead, they've related it to Q and other, just people they call crazy. So they're like, hey, you know, now child trafficking. Look at these Q people always talking about child trafficking. Why are they always talking about child trafficking? It's like, well, regardless if they're Q people or not, the child trafficking thing is real. The pedophilia,
Yeah.
regardless if they're a Q person or not. And the fact that they're kind of like poo-pooing it, even though like publicly, you know, the Epstein case became a huge case and everybody were like, oh shit, he's linked to Bill Gates, he's linked to all these politicians and businessmen and all this stuff, and it could be blackmail and all, you know, Alan Dershowitz, all this stuff. It just, it boggles my mind. And then when you look at just like stuff like you know, Hillary Bill, when he got that lady who was what the fuck's her name, who got caught bringing like 40 undocumented children from Haiti to Dominican Republic. You know, she close to the Clintons, or Bill gets involved and got her 6 months time, and you know, no explanations of that. Why are you defending somebody who did something like that? I mean, and all these just
That woman that you're talking about, she works at Amber Alert now. There was yeah, no, and I think it's the same woman. It's Hillary Clinton with Hugh Aberdeen got, I forget what her name is, but it was like 33 children, by the way. I don't know the magic number there, but 33 children from Haitian children that they were trying to smuggle in, and then they got busted or whatever. And then and Hillary Clinton and Hugh Aberdeen got her off, as far as we know, in their emails. And then that woman that was stealing children ends up working at Amber Alert.
wow. I think it was
that's not Q, that's not Pizzagate, anything. That's just like, wait a second, there's an absolute case where there were children that were trying to be taken into the States. She works for these people, and now she works at Amber Alert. That's not Q, that's nothing. Go look it up. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's Laura Silsby, right?
There you go. Yeah.
But I know you got to go, and I know you're. Where are you moving to? Are you moving back to the States, or where are you?
Yeah, we're just selling our our place has been for sale, but yeah, we just packed up and we're moving back to the States. So probably trying to get some off-grid place there. So we got family back there, and things are getting a little hairy here.
Really?
With communism. That's a whole nother conversation, but yeah. And so it's a good time to move. For you know, we hope to be back here because I love Hawaii. I freaking love it here.
I feel like there's it's a good place for somebody spiritual. There's a lot of you know, history there, and it seems to be like people who I've talked to who've gone there talk about just this very spiritual vibe there. You know, just seems like a special place.
There, it's pretty magical. I honestly didn't think I'd even like it here because I was, you know, I'm a Midwest boy and I'm not some freaking island boy, but I love it here. You know, there's some, you know, things that kind of suck, but you know, anywhere you are, but all in all, it's great. I'm gonna miss it for sure, but hopefully be back. Hopefully.
So where, for people listening, the best places to check out the documentaries we referenced, and check out all your work is still martyleeds33.com.
Yep, and you have to become a member. If there's free membership, and then you can become a member for like $5 a month, and you know, it's a membership, so it renews and that sort of thing. But we do that just because we have to protect, because we've our website, because we've already been attacked, and they basically just ended up costing us money and blah blah blah. That's a whole another story. But martyleeds33.com is the best place to find everything. I will be branching out here moving forward, but right now I'm just kind of doing that and figuring out, like, I think library's kind of opening up and Rumble's starting to look good, so you know, might start doing more of that. But martyleeds33.com, best place.
Yeah, this guy Matt from Content Safe, he does it with my stuff, where he's a big alternative media consumer of the content. We have a mutual friend, Richard Grove. I'm sure you're familiar with Richard Grove.
Richard Grove, yeah, sure, yeah.
And what he does is that you upload your stuff one place, and he does the same thing that basically what RSS feed does, where it sends it to all the places.
Yeah.
He synced my YouTube account to my Float account, to a Float account, Odyssey, a library, all that stuff. So I put it one place, and then it goes everywhere. So it's good, because I had the same problem you had, where it's like, well, which one am I going to upload to? And am I going to spend all this time uploading content, and then next thing you know, this platform is going to be, you know,
exactly.
So that's always the concern. But it's always good to, obviously, with the censorship issue becoming such a bigger and bigger deal, anytime I can try to support some of these smaller platforms, it's good, because you can't do any fucking research on YouTube or Google anymore. So you kind of need
none. Yeah, they've clamped it down. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Marty. Really appreciate your time. Good luck
Thank you, man.
tax sale. And hopefully next time we talk, maybe you'll be in the States somewhere.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, I'd love to do it again. So,
Thanks, Marty. Take care.
yep. Bye.